Hey, what's good, movie fans? It is Bobby here coming to you from the Just Another Movie Guy podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. If you are existing patrons, welcome back. And if you're brand new, there are a couple of episodes available. So if you haven't listened to those, go listen to them. I speak to Nick Taliadoros of Our Hollow Our Home and 6 Point Media about the Lord of the Rings trilogies. And I spoke to Jim White of YouTube last episode about the original Star Wars trilogies. They're exciting episodes. And if you want to go listen to them and get up to date before listening to this one, feel free. If not, let's get into this. I'm not going to be doing any news or anything like that today because I've got quite a hefty conversation ahead of me with my guest today. I knew it would be long, so I'm keeping this intro short and I'm just going to get straight into this. So let's introduce our guest for today. Today, I'm going to be speaking to somebody who needs very little introduction. The majority of people that listen to this show know this person very well. If you're a fan of the band, you know that we've played with this guy's band many, many times. The City Is Ours. Please welcome to the show an absolute titan in the field of debate and conversation, co-host of the Versus podcast. Welcome to the show, my boy, Mikey Page.
Yo, what the fuck is up? It's your boy. Am I allowed to swear?
You can swear, just don't say the C word because this is a family-friendly show.
I was just worried that I might have just ruined your podcast already. I've literally been on it for 0.3 seconds.
No, you're good. You're good.
Yes! Killer.
How are you, Mikey Page?
I'm wonderful, my dude. It's wonderful to speak to you. Primarily just to speak to somebody who I know and who I love and who is not inside my own house. So it's great to It's great to be here. It's great to be here with you and doing something different. I'm so gassed that you're finally doing this, man, because we've spoken about you doing this podcast game for God knows how long. I remember being in Holland last summer talking about this.
Yeah.
And now you're finally doing it, bro. I feel like a proud uncle or something.
It's good. It's good, man. It took a worldwide pandemic to get me there, but I got there in the end. So we had this conversation about this episode actually way before I'd even started recording these, and you were the one that came up with the idea for the Spider-Man podcast, and I cannot wait to get into this. But
instant regret.
Before we get into this, how's lockdown been for you? How's everything going?
Oh, mate. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm at that point now because we are, what are we, 11 weeks, 12 weeks in now, aren't we? It's
I don't even know.
It's been a hefty ass chunk of time at one way or the other, isn't it? So I think I'm at that point now where I'm kind of at peace with it, and I think everybody I've spoken to has had a period of time during the lockdown where it's kind of like they've just had some kind of weird, I don't want to say meltdown because everybody kind of has their own way of dealing with things, but everybody's had this like low moment at least once where it's just like,
yeah, definitely.
Oh my God. And I had one and it was not great and everything was kind of a bit like, whoa, and, very overwhelming and whatever. And, some of it was to do with lockdown stuff. Some of it wasn't, but everything's just been magnified by this whole situation. So I think it's just been like trying to figure out sort of how to deal with it. And once I figured that out and I got some stuff off my chest, it's like, it's been okay, man. It's like, in the grand scheme of things, this is like, I've been trying to sort of hang on to the idea that, we are never going to get this opportunity again to sort of be creative, like, limit free, basically, in terms of being able to do what we want. Things like this podcast. Obviously, we started our own podcast during this time just because it was, we had been talking about it for a little while and we were like, no time like now. We've got time to kill. Writing music, even if it's stuff that doesn't get used, it's just stuff that you're just being able to sit down. I play guitar a lot just for the sake of playing guitar, which is something I never do anymore. And sort of just being able to sort of fall back in love with the art again. So overall, I would say like it's been a pretty positive experience, but I think it's just sort of understanding and recognizing how it kind of affects people on different levels and then kind of dealing with that in such a way to sort of, reach your own kind of equilibrium with it, I guess.
Yeah, it's been a weird one because I've definitely had, I've had a couple of weeks where I've had a lull and like been really unmotivated. Like even doing this podcast, there's been a couple of moments where I'm like, what's the fucking point? But the irony of that is this is the situation that it took for me to actually get this ball rolling and to get that creative juice flowing, if you know what I mean. So it is a weird one, but I think I've learned a lot about myself in this period of time, because obviously I've been furloughed from work, so I've literally been at home finding work and doing stuff with 6 Point Media and things like that. So I've learned a lot about myself through all of this. I've learned that I really fucking love biscuits. That's a thing. I have gone through so many packets of Golden Crunch fucking Foxes.
Oh,
it's unreal.
the cream ones.
Yeah, dude.
Oh my god, god tier. God tier.
Yeah.
They are phenomenally good.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's been strange, but at the same time, it's been kind of euphoric in the sense that I've managed to do a lot of things that I wouldn't necessarily have time to do before, and I've found a lot of loves of things that I didn't even know existed, if that makes sense.
100%, dude. I can completely kind of relate to that. I think having the time to kind of sort of spend on yourself in some ways is like a really, like, I'm just trying to sort of like I said, you can't take for granted that this is as negative as this whole situation is, obviously, given what's going on outside the confines of our own homes.
Of course, yeah.
We're never going to get the opportunity to spend time on ourselves like this as individuals, as people, probably ever again in our lifetimes.
Yeah.
This is, we've never known anything like, I'm 27 now. I've never known anything even remotely close to this. My parents are, double my age. They've never known anything like this. My grandparents are like 3 times my age. They've never known anything like this. And, there's all sorts of stuff, members of people's families who have lived through fucking world wars that have never dealt with a situation quite like this.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And that's the sort of reality of the situation. And it is just sort of being able to try and spin it as a positive. And for me, there was definitely a defining point where I was like, okay, like, this is how it is. I'm going to be all right. And that's what I'm going to do with it. And that'll be okay. But yeah, just trying to sort of spend some time on myself, obviously working with Down for Life Music, which is great. I've been helping loads of artists out with, various plans and things of how to sort of, make the most out of the time, which is awesome. It's great to be, working on that. Spent some time on myself, trying to eat a bit better, work out a bit more, lost some weight. It's just like, I do feel like I sat down with the City Boys a little while ago, and we were all, having a conversation. We're like, yeah, man, it's been really good because I'm working out and everyone's kind of, losing weight and everything else. This is great. And then we sort of spoke to other people. And this is probably the only time in our lives, again, where we are going to be the people that are in that situation, because City are very renowned for, we show up, we do our thing. None of us, usually 5 hairy dudes, none of us really take care of ourselves particularly. We're all a bit kind of just sort of like, yeah, hey man, what's going on? I've been working out every day. All of the guys have been eating better. I mean, obviously the fact that all of the fast food restaurants have been closed has helped drastically. but like, we've all been like, yeah, and I've spoken to loads of other people and they're like, oh yeah, man, I've put on so much weight, or, I've eaten shit, or I've just, whatever it is. And I'm like, is someone like upstairs fucking with me or something? Like, what's going on here? Like, I'm supposed to be the guy that's drowning himself in gravy, like, not you. Like, what the fuck is going on? So,
dude, it's the weird thing is that's me. I've literally, like, the home workout shit, I've fucked it all. Like, I did it for about a week, and then I was fed up with lifting a concrete slab, so I decided instead I was just going to eat copious amounts of Fox's biscuits and go, it'll be all right when I get back in the gym.
But the thing is, though, like, I'm sure it'll be fine. Like, when the world goes back to normal, you'll be crushing it in the gym again, and
yeah, absolutely,
getting all wedged. And as soon as the drive-through's open and I haven't got a queue from my house to Aylesbury to get in there, I'll be in there every day like I was before, and normality will be restored, I'm sure.
Yeah,
who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe not. Hopefully I might be able to restrain oneself, but who knows? It's a bit like Bruce in Finding Nemo. Just one bite. That'll be me.
Yeah.
Hello, Bruce. That's your boy right there.
All right, so let's talk quickly about the Versus podcast. I feel like this is a good platform to talk about a podcast, don't you?
Yeah, I feel a bit of podcast love, definitely. Why not? Yeah, the Versus podcast. Cool.
So,
hit me with it. Lay it on me, baby.
When you brought the podcast out, I'm not gonna lie, I was like, shit, they've beaten me to the punch. But obviously there's no bitterness at all. I love what you guys are doing, and when the first episode was released, I listened to it straight away. I got up in the morning, took the dog for a walk, and I was on it, and I've listened to it since. I really enjoy what you guys are doing. Let's just real quick, let's talk about where this idea came from.
Well, yeah, I mean, a podcast is something that I've wanted to do for a while. Like, real talk, when I was a kid at school, there was two things that I really wanted to be. Well, three things that I really wanted to be. When I was little, I was going to be a professional footballer. Nice. And that's the way it was going to be. Because I played football when I was a kid, and I was great. Then I hit my teenage years. I hit 12 and just became fat. I don't really know what happened. It was like my 12th birthday, my mother got me cellulite. It was awesome. And then that was kind of like, well, okay, well, my football career is done then, because I literally can't run anymore. So, which was very disappointing. And I was like, what's the obvious thing to do here? Clearly, I'm fat and food must be a thing, so I'm going to be a chef. That would be great. That lasted for all of about 10 minutes. And then from then on, I wanted to be a radio presenter. Okay. That was like my thing. It's like this, obviously creative paths and stuff. And it's not something I've talked about a lot, to be totally honest. But, creative paths have always been a thing that I've been interested in. I was relatively academic at school, but like it was all about the media side of things, and music, obviously, for being able to put that outlet across. But aside from the music stuff, it's just something about radio that I love, just being able to convey what you're doing through the medium of using your voice and being able to talk about what you're doing and express songs and things like that. Yeah. So obviously then a podcast, years later, podcasts start to become a bit more of a thing, and it's something that I've been a fan of for many years in terms of like listening and appreciating other people. And there's various different types of podcasts that I listen to, and I just love the whole kind of expression of it. And I've always kind of been a fan of sort of these podcasts that give you give you that educational value, but also don't take themselves too seriously. And like, it's the fun element and the sort of taking something away from it element are the two things that I love about it. Yeah. And I was like, I want to do something like that. But, I've been sat on it for ages. I was trying to come up with an idea. Originally, ironically, went to the guys with a sort of Down for Life music thing. I was like, oh, maybe I could do that, because my branch of the sort of business is slightly different to the others anyway. So I'm kind of, pushing it in a slightly different direction and branching it out to other sort of client bases and stuff. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll do that. And it was all kind of like, maybe we could do something like that. And I was brainstorming some ideas. And then I went to Toby and I was like, look, I've come up with this idea. Obviously you're relatively aware, but like Toby and I are quite similar in the way that we function, but different enough that there's enough there for it to be kind of a conversation. We're both, we've both got quite sort of like dark senses of humor, and it's all quite, relatively twisted in places and things like that. But there's enough for us to be able to sort of butt heads on it, but with, a similar enough vibe. And through Down for Life, we'd been spending a lot of time on the phone, talking about various things. And obviously, myself working with Hollow and, the City Hollow relationship and all of these things. We've spent a lot of time together in the past doing different things. And I just went to him and I was like, look, I think me and you should give it a go. I think it'd be really funny. Like, the conversations we have are so organic and so, we just say what we say it as we see it. That's always been the way that we are. You know what he's like? He's probably way worse than I am in that. Well, that's exactly it. But it's like, this is us here now. Let's put a microphone on it and see what happens. And that is basically what we did. So it's interesting that you say, you were worried about it when we released our podcast, because when I first heard your first episode with Nick, which was banging, by the way.
Thank you.
We'd had Nick on our podcast already. So I was like, okay, this is going to be interesting, because, you've got a direct comparison at this point. Yeah. And we got Nick on our podcast, and it was just carnage. It was just, obviously, the three of us, we're all like weapons of the first degree. And it was literally just the three of us pissing our pants laughing, and just, there was no thought process. There was no planning. There was no foresight. It was literally just like, let's just chat about shit. And then I listened to yours, and it was like night and day. Like it was so obvious that you'd thought about every kind of element of what you were doing, and it was so well put together that I was like, oh fuck me. Like, he smashed it out of the park.
I think you can't really compare, because I mean I've done this one as sort of like, let's talk about films. I want to give something to the people that are listening, like some educational value, like you said before, but I enjoy how chaotic the Versus podcast is. Like it I find myself crying with laughter. Like the episode you did with Dan Kerr, I was crying because you spent most of that episode crying. It was unbelievable. It's so funny.
Oh man, he nearly killed me. I don't think I've laughed like that for, I can't even tell you. Like the thing is that, like, the beauty of it, and the reason that I wanted the Versus podcast to be the way that it was, and we talked about various ideas. And I sort of settled, again, we were talking about all this stuff, and I sort of said to Toby, I was like, what about if it's me and you versus a guest? Like, that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Let's not overcomplicate it, because there was all sorts of different ideas, and it's like we're basically going head to head with the guest and just sort of thrashing out a conversation. And like, I promise you, there is like zero planning, zero foresight. We'll sit down at the beginning. We'll sit down to do the part. Usually there's a small segment at the beginning, which is just the two of us, and then an interview with our guest. The interview with the guest is, obviously we'll sit down and we'll be like, look, obviously, we're going to talk about this. So for example, if it was you and I, it would be like, okay, cool, Bobby, we're going to talk about Hollow. We'll see how that came about for you. We'll talk about the podcast. We talk about a few other things that you've got going on with 6 Point or something like that. And then that's it. And the conversation just leads itself.
Yeah.
Toby and I sit down to do our beginning bit. It's literally like, hey man, are you recording? Yeah, cool. And then we're in.
Yeah.
So like the first episode, I'm not even going to say, like, he didn't say anything particularly bad, but he brought up a particular individual, and it's there for you to go and listen to yourselves on all, major podcast platforms if you wish. But he brought up a name, and I remember being sat in my studio being like, we are literally less than 15 minutes into our first podcast, and he's just brought that particular individual's name.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
I can't say it because I'm not going to say it on your podcast, because he didn't say anything incriminating. He didn't say anything bad, because when we went back to our management team and we were like, yeah, everything was fine, but we said this, they were literally like, no, you can't release it. No. And I was like, honestly, it's not bad. And when they listen to it, like, it's fine. I'm obviously probably painting a terrible picture for myself and digging myself a massive hole in the ground. But like, the whole thing for us is it's that organic nature is the kind of thing that just, the reason I wanted to do it in the first place, but also that I think it gives it the charm of what we're doing. It's very much kind of like we're not here to take ourselves too seriously. We're not here to kind of make this a big thing about, whatever it is that we're doing. We're just here to have some fun, try and hopefully give something back to people in the form of enjoyment. Sometimes, some of the episodes are a little more educational, and you learn a bit about processes or about people's lives in particular. We did one with Oz Craggs, who produced all the City records, and
that was a great episode.
And he's an unbelievable man anyway, but like he was so it was such an educational process of how he'd got from point A to point B, and the way that the City records were put together and stuff. And some of them are just chaos. When you do episodes with Nick and he starts talking about the plural of moose being meese, like, I don't know what, I don't know. And that's just the way that it is. And the beauty of it is that we just don't know what it's going to be like until we get there. So yeah, it's, a lot of fun. It's on hold at the moment. We are, we've got, both of us have got a few bits going on, and have had for a few weeks. Yeah. But I promise you now, it's coming back. If anybody here is one of the people that's been messaging me, thank you for messaging, and thank you for sticking by us and listening to it, because we're having a lot of fun putting it together. And in the meantime, listen to Bobby's podcast, because it's way better than ours anyway. So yeah, we'll be back with our shit at some point.
There you go. Yeah, if you're listening, head over to all major podcast platforms and you can listen to the Versus podcast. I promise you will have an absolute whale of a time. So, as everybody is probably aware by the fantastic artwork this week by Danielle Kilroy, my lovely other half, which actually, Mikey, you haven't seen yet. I'm gonna send
I
it
haven't
to
seen,
you.
I didn't know Danny was doing it either. That's wicked.
Yeah, Danny's done this week's, and I'm going to send it to you shortly. As of recording this, Mikey hasn't seen it, but everybody listening will see it because it's already been out, blah, blah, blah.
Amazing. I'm excited.
We're talking about Spider-Man today, and we're not, kind of in contrast to the episodes I've done before, we're not talking about anything specific. We're just discussing Spider-Man movies, and we're not doing it in a way of... let's talk about these films, what we like, what we don't like. Today, I'm ruffling some feathers and we're debating Spider-Man, and we're going to come to a conclusion of who is the best live-action Spider-Man. So...
oh my. I'm frightened already, man.
starting this conversation
scared.
out, Mikey Page, who is the best live-action Spider-Man, in your opinion?
Off the bat.
Off the bat.
In terms of who I think is the best character in terms of portraying the character of Peter Parker, Tom Holland without a shadow of a doubt, in my opinion.
Okay.
But that doesn't necessarily mean he's my favourite. That doesn't necessarily mean... The thing about Tom Holland for me is that when you read the comic books and you are presented with it in such a way that, you know, he is a young boy at school, you know, minding his own business, who suddenly ends up being one of the world's greatest superheroes. It's like the dream of any kid at school, right? Tom Holland just seems to be able to portray that perfectly. Like, he has this kind of, he looks the part, it feels right, he sounds the part. However, they've had 3 goes at it by this point. And I think that kind of has to be taken into account. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's the whole MCU by this point in time is a completely different ball game to where we were the best part of 20 years ago when the first Spider-Man was announced as being, you know, a live action Spider-Man movie. So there's so many layers to it. I don't really know where you want to start with it. But off the bat, that's my opinion. But that doesn't necessarily mean that will be my opinion at the end of this episode, is basically what I'm saying.
You'll probably notice that I've been very quiet through that statement.
I have noticed that, yeah.
That is because, my friend, a spanner in the works is, I think, Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man is the best Spider-Man.
Ooh.
Now, I can feel everybody listening to this breathing, seething right now. And I will explain why later on, and I'm going to get in depth with it. And obviously, this is something we're going to come back to after we've discussed it. But off the top of my head, if somebody asked me who is the best live-action Spider-Man, it's Andrew Garfield.
Okay.
Moving on.
I mean, you're wrong, but okay.
We will get back to it, but I just wanted to open the conversation up with that.
No, good. This is going to be fun.
So, you told me just before this call that you had recently watched the Sam Raimi, Tobey Maguire Spider-Man films, didn't you?
Yeah. Yes. So when we talked about doing this, it was, you know, Spider-Man's one of those things where I absolutely adore Spider-Man.
So do I.
Like, I love the story. I love the concept. He's always been my kind of favorite superhero. Like,
Spider-Man's kind of that iconic Marvel superhero, really. Everybody knows Spider-Man.
yeah, I just love the whole kind of underdog, kind of carefree, fun element to him. And, you know, it was so kind of emotional, particularly when he was portrayed by Tobey Maguire for some reason. But so kind of like, we'll get onto that, believe me. But it's so like, so emotional and so kind of like organic in the way that it was kind of put together as a character, obviously by Stan Lee and the guys back in the day. And it's always been sort of, Spider-Man was sort of the front runner for me. Sorry. In that whole world, it felt to me like the most relatable. I don't know if it's just because of where I was in my life at the time, but the most relatable in terms of like, oh, wouldn't it be sick if you were Spider-Man? Like, it could be me. He's a kid at school. So, you know, obviously it's a, you know, a fantasy world, but like, it's the most attainable. So I think I just got on board with that early on. So yeah, when we talked about doing the podcast, it was like, I'm gonna have to go back and sort of revisit my childhood on this a little bit, because obviously, like, I'm a massive Spider-Man fan. I love all of the Spider-Man movies for different reasons. You know I have just joked and shat all over Andrew Garfield's movies, but I am only joking. Like, I love those movies too. In some ways, they're actually probably my favorite overall films. But it's like,
okay, I can kind of get behind that in some respects.
Yeah, like, the thing is, I love the overall concept, and I love them all for different reasons. And I don't think that there's one that I could necessarily put above the other. But yeah, I did go back and watch all of the Rami ones from, you know, from start to finish almost. So I did them in order. I did all three of them. And yeah, like, for me, like, I know I said, like, Tom Holland's portrayal of Peter Parker as Spider-Man to me is the most genuine. But Spider-Man, for me personally as an individual, will always be Tobey Maguire. And I kind of relate that in a weird way to kind of the way that people view James Bond.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know if you have this, but like, James Bond to me, because of where I am in my life, if someone says to me James Bond, the first image in my head is Pierce Brosnan, like, every time, because that when I remember James Bond being a thing in my life for the first time, Brosnan was the guy. He's James Bond to me. So it's like, that's the one that I think he's the best one, because he's the one that I got behind. A lot of people, if we were talking, obviously we're not talking about James Bond here right now, but if I said that Pierce Brosnan was my favorite, to a lot of people, I would probably be hanging by my bollocks from the ceiling by a lot of people. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like, are you mental? You know, with some of the people that have played him, you know, the Sean Connerys, the Roger Moores, the people like that, it's like, and you're saying that Pierce Brosnan's the best one. But for me, as a consumer and as a viewer, that's the one that I got behind. And it's the same situation with the Spider-Man movies for me, because with Tobey Maguire, it was so comic book in the way that it was put together. It didn't feel like, you know, there was no real level of realism with it.
It is a spectacle, isn't it? Like, so I went back and I watched the first Spider-Man a couple of days ago, the Tobey Maguire one, and it is such a the way I want to describe it is say it's a fucking movie. Do you know what I mean? Like, it is such a
dude. Like,
as origin stories go, it is one of the best films in the superhero franchise genre.
Oh, dude, 100. Like, it's just, I mean, if you're talking about a Spider-Man movie being a movie, Spider-Man 3 is the one, because that is it's the biggest fucking assault on the senses I've ever experienced in a cinema in my life. Like, they're just throwing fucking bad guys. It's almost like, you know, we've got a 3-film deal here. We've got to the end of it. He's got the girl at the end of the second one, by the way, who, you know, I was so in love with Kirsten Dunst as MJ. Oh my God. Wow. And like, he got her at the end of the second film, and you're like, oh, he's got the girl. Yeah. You know, the end of the first film, she's basically like, Peter, I'm in love with you. And he does the whole noble, I am Spider-Man. Like, you know, whatever. So he does the noble thing, and then at the end of the second movie, she takes the power back, and she's like, "Got power. I don't care. I love you, Peter Parker. We're going to be together." And you're like, sick. And then the third movie rolls around, and you're like, well, what's going to happen here? You know, he's going to...
Everything happens.
Slamming his bird at home. He's going to be like, you know, go and sort some shit out. He's going to go for, you know, pizza. Everything's going to be sweet. Fuck me. They were just like, do you know what? We've got one movie left. Let's just fucking throw everything at it. Let's have 3 bad guys. Let's have James Franco again. Let's have Willem Dafoe just popping out of fucking mirrors every now and then. Who gives a fuck? It was ridiculous. It was honestly, I watched it back 2 nights ago, I think, at the time of recording. And I was like, what? I forgot how mental it was. Like, I knew it was mental, and I forgot how mental it was, because it's just, there's so much that happens. You've got, obviously, the villains. You've got the whole, you know, element of him and MJ. You've then got the, you know, the dark Spider-Man element that then obviously becomes Venom and everything else.
I'm going to interrupt you real quick, because you just mentioned that. The scene, obviously it's fresh in your mind, You know the bit where the symbiote kind of crawls up on him in bed?
Yeah.
And like it goes into his eye and the screen fades to black.
Yeah.
When that scene transitions to him as the symbiote suit facing himself in the windows of that tower, I get goosebumps every time.
It's incredible.
It is so good. Like, for all their flaws, these films know how to do a moment, if that makes sense.
Oh, dude. Like, it's just like I say, there's something about it for me. And I mean, obviously we're here to debate this, but I've got a feeling I'm going to end up coming back to this by the time we get to the end, because it's just always going to be Spider-Man for me, because it's where I fell in love with it. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, you can't, they're all, the one thing that's brilliant about the way that they've all been done is that all three interpretations have been completely different.
Yeah.
In enough of a way for me to be able to appreciate them as three separate things. I can watch each one and not feel like I'm just watching a reboot of the same thing, if that makes sense. Where sometimes you get a remake and it's just like, oh, here we go. You know, we all know the story of Spider-Man. We all know how it came about. And there's elements of it where, you know, it comes through, but it just feels like it's so close to the comic book in terms of it doesn't feel real. It feels like this fantasy world, and I can totally get behind that. But yeah, like that, like you say, with moments in particular, like, you know, there's the moment in, you know, I think in the first movie in the rain where, you know, he's upside down and, you know, he gets his first moment with the girl that he's been in love with since he was 6 years old, but she doesn't know that it's him. So iconic.
Probably something that you know, a lot of people who have watched the films have attempted themselves with their other half. Not gonna lie.
What you do at home in your own bedroom, Bobby, is up to you, my friend.
I've never strung myself up upside down from the ceiling, but I can tell you that an upside down kiss isn't what the Spider-Man film makes it out to be.
Especially when you're peeling back the weird condom latex situation first. Like, I don't know if you've tried that or not. You'll have to, you know.
That's for another fucking podcast.
RateMyMovieKiss.com or something. Yeah, I mean, maybe, yeah. Maybe when you're doing video podcasts, we'll try it out.
But yeah, there's so many iconic moments from these films, you know, like even the small moments that probably a lot of people don't remember so much. Like, I remember one of the best images in my head is in the second Sam Raimi film when there's like the frame of the building is about to fall on MJ and Peter comes running over and he holds the beam up and he's looking down at her and he just goes, "Hi."
Yeah.
And it's so perfect.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing else that he could have said. There's nothing else that they could have put in the script that would have made it more comic accurate and perfect for the way Tobey Maguire plays that character, you know. And speaking of which, every time Tobey Maguire screams, the child inside me just dies. It's so funny. Watching
this is the issue, isn't it? Like, it's like the Spider-Man that well, certainly for me, I don't know about for you, but for me, I was at that right age when it came about where I think, you know, it was that whole thing. If it was the first movie to be a 12A, if I remember rightly, because it had been given a 12 certificate, and I would have been probably about 11, and I was so gassed to see it. I was like, oh my God, Spider-Man. And then, you know, there was this massive thing in the press because it basically meant this is a film based around a kid's character that kids weren't allowed to go and see. And there was this huge thing. So they brought, you know, obviously the certificate boards and stuff sat down and figured out the 12A situation, which basically meant you could go with go with an adult or whatever. So it kind of revolutionized the way that cinema has been sort of received since then, because, you know, it has got that kind of that thing. And there's so many things like that you can credit to this. But to a lot of people, Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man is just a fucking meme. And it just makes me like, it just makes me mad, because it's like, there's, you know, I didn't know how long it was going to be before we got to this point, but obviously the scream from the second movie, which it's been memed everywhere. And I'm not saying I don't think it's funny, because I'm laughing just thinking about it. But like, it is gold. But like, it just totally discredits to a lot of people like the genius of that. And obviously, arguably the biggest one is that whole dance thing from the third movie. And I will be honest with you, it's the only bit of that trilogy of movies that ruins it for me a little bit. I just don't understand.
The thing is with that scene, it's one of those things. So I watched a behind the scenes with Sam Raimi talking about it, and he structured it so that the symbiote suit is kind of what's controlling Peter Parker, right? So that whole really awkward moment where he's dancing in the street and he's like trying to flirt with girls and it just looks really fucking cringe. Apparently it's because that's what Peter Parker perceives as cool, but it's not.
I mean,
and it's supposed to come across like that, but I think they missed the mark just a touch. And it is a meme.
I just think, I mean, I get the premise of it. I understand the reasoning behind it, but the execution, I'm just like, he's doing some kind of weird, like, Saturday Night Fever rip-off dance thing, looking like a fucking member of AFI, and it's just like, you're just kind of sat there like, you don't know whether to start scratching your head, pulling out your best John Travolta moves, or screaming Miss Murder at the top of your lungs. Like, I just don't know. It's such a strange.
It is.
I don't know. Like, I just don't get it. Like, I appreciate there's elements of it when he's in that whole, that character where, he's Eddie, when Eddie steals the job at the Daily Bugle, and he, grabs him by the throat and smashes him against this photo. That's the first you've ever seen of Peter Parker, like, publicly being aggressive or being anything more than a lovely dweeby nerdy dude, and he just basically had this whole no shit attitude, and it's like, oh damn, like it's a shock to you as a viewer because you're like, wow, that's not how he normally behaves. But then like 10 minutes before, he's dancing in the street, looking like a member of the Village People. You're just like, what are you doing? Like, I just don't understand. Like, I get the decision. I understand why they did it. But I just think when surely when you're watching it back as a thing, in edit or whatever, in post, and you're like, yeah, just not sure we kind of hit the mark on that either. Because like, even like, there's the scene in the bar, because obviously he's fallen out with Mary Jane.
Yeah.
She's lost her job, so everything's gone tits up for her. She was on Broadway, now she's working as a waitress in a bar. He brings Gwen in, who's obviously his, female interest for that time. While he's part of that character, he then just shows up, starts jamming on the piano, crazy. That's pretty neat. And then he does this whole kind of dance thing in the bar. It's weird. I'm not going to say it's not weird, but
yeah,
I get it. Like, I understand it. Like, he does this thing. It's all for MJ, but, Gwen thinks it's for her, but it's not. And then there's this whole thing, and she sort of feels bad about it and everything else. And it tells the story.
Yeah.
And it shows Peter being this kind of, this sadistic side and everything else. And I get it. It fits. So why was the dancing down the street, thrusting your pelvis disco moves thing necessary? It just wasn't. In my book, It just wasn't necessary. I'm grateful for it because it does make me laugh every time. But I just think it's the only part of the film where I'm just like, you've had this, like you were saying, that magic moment where he's laid on the bed and the symbiote comes in and takes over him and the whole black suit and then the thing, and it's like, oh my fuck, like this is crazy. It's a totally different element that we've seen. You're sort of struggling to take it all in, and then a couple of minutes later he's dancing down the street in a suit, and I'm just like, what?
You got to think as well, right? So this is kind of harkening back to the point that you made about the 12A rating as well. So this is a film written and directed by Sam Raimi, who before this film, his biggest movie was The Evil Dead.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't watch that film and then think, oh, this guy's going to do a trilogy of Spider-Man films, and your vision isn't that scene of Peter Parker walking down the street, grooving and flexing his hips at girls really creepily. Your vision is the moment in the first film where the Green Goblin sends his glider with a fucking blade that's the size of him into himself. Like, that
Yeah.
is insane, and to this day, shocking.
Yeah.
But you don't, like, Sam Raimi, the third film just doesn't feel like Sam Raimi, and it scares me a little bit, because Sam Raimi is a horror genius. There's a scene in the second Sam Raimi Spider-Man film with Doc Ock's his arms when they all come to life, and he just murders a room full of surgeons. That is so good, and as a short horror film, that is amazing. But then you go to the third film and you see this scene, and you're like, what happened? I just can't get my head around it. And the fact that he himself defends his execution choices with it as well, it's very strange. It's very strange, and I don't get it.
It's just a few bits about it where, I don't know, it just feels a bit like I said, they just tried to throw everything at that final movie, because it was like, we knew it was going to be the last one in the trilogy, and it just gets a little bit
messy.
Kind of mess. Yeah, messy's a really, really good way to describe it, because it's just, there's so much going on, and like, ultimately you've got, in terms of your plots, you've got the whole plot line of your standard villain plot line with the Sandman, basically, and obviously they tie Peter Parker in because it turns out that he's the guy who killed Uncle Ben in the first place. Great. Plot number one. Plot number two, obviously the Peter and MJ story, and sort of figuring that out. And then arguably plot number three, as a subplot, maybe you've got this whole situation with Peter being able to work at the Bugle and Eddie coming in there and stuff like that. And then it just gets so crowded with, obviously the underlying thing of all of this, by the way, being the whole symbiote thing, and, this whole idea of Peter trying to find himself. That's basically what this whole movie is wrapped up in.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? All of that stuff is based around that one theme. All of the branding on, when it was in the cinemas and stuff, was this whole kind of idea of the black suit and everything else. And the looking in the mirrors and things. So he was in the regular suit in one, and in the glass he'd be black, and he'd have the black suit on. And it was, a really intriguing way to kind of market it, because it is very much this kind of Peter trying to find himself and figure his own way out, which is kind of how they left the end of the second movie.
Yeah. With
the whole MJ thing, sort of saying, I can't be with you because of this. And she's saying, well, I'll make my own choices. Thanks very much. So it all made sense. But then it's just kind of like they threw so much, all three of those avenues, with this fourth bedding the whole thing, that in places it just gets completely like, I just in some ways just can't take it seriously. Like, it's so odd. Like, you've got these incredible moments and these incredible cinematic scenes where the symbiote's taking over him, and obviously the scene with Eddie and as Venom at the end, and Spider-Man having the fight together is unreal. Like, the fight scene there is amazing, and the part where he uses his web to pull Eddie out of the symbiote skin thing effectively is incredible. Like, it's mad cinema, and then you're wrapping that in amongst fucking Tobey Maguire dancing down the street in a suit, man. It's just like whatever you do and whatever you say about that trilogy, it's just such a shame, because it always boils down to those two things. And the meme of him screaming from the second one is funny because it's a scream and somebody changed the audio. That's why it's funny. It's not discrediting to the movie. It's just funny because of that. Obviously, he is quite, his expression and the way that he uses his face. He's, he cries a lot, and there's obvious meme territory there. But there's no defending that scene where it's not because it's we put different music over it. No, it's because it's weird. Like, it's a strange part of the film that doesn't really make any sense. And I guess that's just kind of the I still don't really know where I stand on it, but like, as a trilogy overall, I just think they're brilliant, and it just being able to sit down and watch them again, because it has been a long time since I've actually watched them. Honestly, it was just like being a kid again. It was brilliant. I just sort of sat and watched them all.
Yeah, it's very popcorn. It's a
100%.
popcorn experience. I mean, I would like, if I have children down the line and stuff, I will be so excited to sit down with them and be like, this is the Spider-Man from my generation, and just watch them from their experience of it. But the films I probably won't be showing them is the Amazing Spider-Man films. Now, that might come as a little bit of a surprise, considering I already said that Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man is my favourite Spider-Man out of the three. But
yeah, you'd definitely be correct in saying that.
the films I don't like. I think the Amazing Spider-Man films, in a nutshell, are messy and tonally just off. But the reason I think Andrew Garfield is the best Spider-Man, and I will put emphasis on Spider-Man, is because his portrayal of the character, especially in the Amazing Spider-Man 2, I think is perfect. Not so much Peter Parker, because I think Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker was a bit too cool.
Yeah, agreed.
They tried to play it off as he's this nerdy kid, but he wasn't. He was this really good looking guy who skateboarded and took photos and shit. Like, let's be real, every girl from that school is going to be like, I want a bit of Peter Parker.
Yeah.
Not Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker, because he's a fucking weird specky nerd.
Yeah.
But Andrew Garfield's portrayal of Spider-Man, I think, is perfect. I think it's tonally perfect for the comic books. Every line and bit of dialogue, and he's got that really cheeky attitude that Spider-Man's supposed to have, and he plays with everyone, no matter how serious it is, apart from the end of the second film when obviously the girl he loves is in jeopardy. Up until then, everybody he fights and everybody he's up against, he plays with. And Sam Raimi's films took it a little bit more seriously, where obviously Tobey Maguire's getting really badly hurt and he's bleeding and he's screaming all the time. But I really like that kind of attitude he has with the Amazing Spider-Man films. And his suit in the second Amazing Spider-Man film is perfect. It is so close to the original Amazing Spider-Man suit, which is by far one of the best lines of comics. If you haven't read them, just go pick some up, because they're incredible. But yeah, as Peter Parker, I don't think Andrew Garfield is great, but as Spider-Man, I do. So that's the reason for what I said earlier on. That's why I think his Spider-Man is the best.
I totally get on board with what you're saying there. I think you are exactly right in that he's got this whole kind of, it's like a game to him when he's doing his thing. It doesn't feel real, and that then means that when the incident with Gwen at the end of the second one happens, like the emotion in that is just magnified so massively, because it's all been very flippant until there's two major emotional episodes that happen for him, in that he has obviously, well, he's got the incident with Uncle Ben, clearly the standard one, but then you've got obviously police commissioner Gwen's father being killed, and that whole situation happening at the end of the first one, and then the Gwen situation at the end of the second one. Everything in between, it's this kind of flippant, childish, boyish game version of, I'm just doing this and playing with you, and basically when I'm ready, I'll just fuck you up.
Yeah.
And I love that, because you are right, that is kind of the overall vibe and the way that Spider-Man should be, and it is accurate to the vision that everybody had when creating the character, many moons ago. If we're here to debate, here comes my debate.
Let's do it.
You're probably correct in what you're saying about that one particular thing, but I don't think we can sit here and say that Garfield's therefore is the best, because I think that the charm of it and the genius of it is you have to be able to do both. And that's the thing that really ruined it for me with the Garfield movies, is that the whole point of this thing is it's like that weird kind of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde situation, where you've got one character is such a way and another character is completely like, it's like the way that the way that Peter Parker wants to be, or the way that he can be kind of free in himself, is through Spider-Man. It's through that idea of having the mask and behaving in such a way that he can be free, and he's obviously people looking up to him, and girls all oh my god, Spider-Man, we love him. And that's the kind of thing, if they saw Peter Parker, they wouldn't look twice at him. But he's the same character, and I think the genius of it is being able to do both. And for me, that's why, as a performance and as a portrayal, Tom Holland is the guy for me, because I think he does both the best. Of the three, which do I think is most genuinely a nerdy high school kid living a normal life, believable, who then has this kind of crazy thing happen to him and then becomes this comic book version that we all know and love, that plays the game and does things in such a way and is kind of sort of, you know, he has questions about the way that he is and he has questions about the things that are going on. It's difficult to compare it because obviously in the Tom Holland situation, he's wrapped up in the MCU, and I think that's why it's hard to compare to anything from like the Sam Raimi films or anything like that, is that he's wrapped up in such a situation. So he's Tony Stark's boy, basically. That's the thing. He's going to be the successor to Tony Stark and Stark Industries and everything else. He's the guy, but he doesn't think that he's going to be the guy. So it's about, that's his story at that point. So you can't really compare it to the Tobey Maguire thing.
I agree that you can't, but see, for me, Tom Holland, unfortunately, falls the bottom of the pile.
Okay.
And, like, that is a really controversial opinion. I know it is. And a lot of people probably going to throw some shit at me for that. But I think it is... he doesn't do a bad job at all. And I like Homecoming and I like Far From Home and I love his portrayal of Spider-Man as the kid who is... he does want to be, you know, up there with Iron Man and things like that. But outside of the MCU, and this is why the whole Sony thing at the moment is gonna be interesting to see how that plays out, because I can't see Tom Holland doing a good standalone franchise like Tobey Maguire did, like Andrew Garfield did. I can't see it. I can't see Tom Holland in either of those roles in those film sagas.
Yeah, but it's difficult to be able to say anything in that respect without us knowing. Like it's an unknown entity at the moment, isn't it? That's the thing, and I think there's a certain emotional involvement as well. Like I said, I don't necessarily think Tom Holland is my favorite. I think the thing about Tom Holland is that whole portrayal is the most believable in terms of the way that it is, but equally, the way that films are being made has changed. You know, we're talking the best part of 20 years from you know, one to the other in terms of the first Spider-Man movie to Far From Home being the most recent. That's a lot of time for the way that films are being made. You know, the visual effects have come on a lot since then. Obviously the storyline, the way that the story is being brought about, because the MCU wasn't a thing in the first instance. The Spider-Man movies were a trilogy and that was it, really. It wasn't until Iron Man came about that they kind of went, okay, we've got something here. And, you know, obviously then over a period of 10 years or whatever, you know, spiraled into this crazy story that was intertwined in itself. And honestly, you know, it's a masterpiece when you think about it, the way that it's been put together. So many different avenues, so many characters, and, you know, obviously it then came down to, you know, Endgame or whatever, and it's just stunning. Stunning. But Tom Holland's wrapped up in the middle of all of that, so it's difficult. That's where I think it's difficult to compare, because he's a small cog in a much larger machine. Whereas with Tobey Maguire and with Andrew Garfield, to be fair, they were both in situations where they were the front runner of their own franchise at that time. And obviously there was this whole weird situation going on where the MCU was doing one thing, and then Sony had, you know, Spider-Man, so they were just doing the Amazing Spider-Man movies just because, and then Spider-Man then appears back in the MCU but with a different face. And you're like, because, you know, I obviously understood why, but it kind of in some ways would have made more sense if Garfield had appeared in the MCU, because at least then that way you'd have had this kind of, like I said, clearly get why they didn't, but like you'd have had this cohesion with it. But they're then reinventing the character again, and I think that is probably part of the reason that Tom Holland ended up being cast, because they had to do something different with it.
Yeah,
they looked at the criticisms of Andrew Garfield, which largely are the Peter Parker stuff, because at the end of the day, I mean, I'm going to put it out on the podcast that I am also completely in love with Emma Stone. Like, I love her so much. She's unreal. And obviously, so she's in it. She's really like pretty girl. She's the girl that people, you know, if you were at school with in that era, in that, you know, fantasy world, she is that girl. Peter Parker is not the douchey, nerdy kid that
he's supposed to be,
that they're trying to, like, he's supposed to be. You know, you see those two together and it's like, yeah, well, that makes sense. Whereas with like Tobey Maguire, it's believable. Like, you get it. He's such a, you know, taking pictures for the school paper and all of this stuff like he is. Mary Jane is clearly hot and she's, you know, funny. Like, she's got her own little quirk and everything else, and it's all, you know, groovy and whatever else. And that's kind of the way that it sort of plays out. But it's believable, whereas with the Garfield one, it just isn't. And that's why I think it's interesting with the way that they approach the whole Mary Jane thing, well, the whole MJ thing, in the newer ones in the MCU, because they've kind of put a different spin on her as opposed to on him, to sort of...
Yeah, a lot of people don't like that, do they? They're not a fan of Zendaya's MJ. I like it. I actually dig it. I think it's a really good way to reintroduce a character that everybody has known from the Raimi films quite well into the MCU. I have no digs with it. The only thing I didn't like that they changed was the way they portrayed Flash in the MCU.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Because I really like Flash as a character. Like in those films, the way that he, like, as a character, the way he's portrayed, I think is really good. I think he brings a nice element to the film.
Yeah.
But did it have to be that character? Do you know what I mean?
That's what I mean. It's a bit out of place. And Flash is supposed to bully Peter, and he kind of does in the MCU, but it comes across more like friendly banter. But Flash is supposed to be that person that, you know, pushes Peter to kind of unleash his powers in the comics and in the Sam Raimi films.
There's a couple of parts in it that I think are great, like in terms of little flashes, and I do think you know, pardon the pun, but like with the MCU, there's a particular scene in Far From Home where he's talking about how Spider-Man makes him want to be a better person. And he's doing this big speech about how, you know, they're all sort of saying, oh, Spider-Man's, you know, rubbish. Mysterio is going to be this new guy. And he's saying about how amazing Spider-Man is. And then Peter Parker walks in and Flash calls, I can't remember exactly what he calls him, but it's like, you know, oh, hey, Dick Milk, where have you been? Or something like that. And it's like, it's just funny. Like, it's little things like that I just think are genius in the way that they put some, you know, filter things like that in. I like the MJ thing, because for me, it feels current, it feels relevant, and it doesn't feel forced.
Yeah.
It's like when you look at the original trilogy, like I said, is very, very close to the original comic. It's very, you know, all of the way that, even down to the point of, you know, MJ in the first one has got that, you know, real ruby red hair. And in the second one, it's more of this kind of like, sort of almost like traditional sort of gingery red hair, as opposed to this, you know, cartoon-esque, blatantly obviously dyed, not human coloured hair. And then it gradually, she becomes more of a real entity to try and give that realism as they go through. But it's all very much like that, you know. The portrayal of Jonah Jameson at the Bugle it's exactly as it was written in the comics. You know,
love it. I love Jonah Jameson, and the fact that he came back for the MCU as well, is perfect. And his reveal, that was when I saw that film in the cinema. His reveal, my jaw hit the floor. And I was like, I remember grabbing Danny's arm and being like, oh my God, he's back. And she was like, what? And,
with what?
But yeah, it's so good. And I love how they did that. And I think of the Raimi films, Jonah Jameson is probably one of the best characters. He's portrayed perfectly.
But that's exactly it. And that's the thing. And I think with the MJ thing, it's like the thing that I think is interesting and a lot of people haven't probably considered is with the first ones, it's very traditional comic book. You know, Kirsten Dunst plays MJ. The story, you know, she moved in when he was 6. He's been in love with her ever since. Fine. Garfield comes along and it's Gwen Stacy. You know, a subplot from the comic books. Obviously, she made an appearance in the original Sam Raimi movies, but it's all about her. So that whole there's no comparison there. So what the MCU have done is just reinvented it again. It's reinventing. I know it's an existing character. Obviously, you know, she's not. I think she's Michelle Jones, isn't she? In the new one, if I remember rightly, she's not actually Mary Jane, but I might be wrong about that. But
I'm not actually too sure. I don't know.
I think they even changed the character name, which is part of the reason that a lot of people were upset about it. I think again, don't quote me on that, but I'm relatively sure that's the case. I do get it, but to me, it feels genuine, and it's the whole thing about the MCU that I think is different is it's got this kind of, obviously they're fantasy films, but it's got this kind of sort of real life, it could happen feeling about it. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's the way that Spider-Man becomes about is all because of Tony Stark and his technology.
Yeah, and I quite dig that side of it.
And I think that's, for me, it wasn't really an issue for me. I mean, like, you know, it's they've cast Zendaya, cool. Like, you know, she's a great actress. Obviously you've got the ethnic diversity, which is great. Obviously, you know, you can't, I get there's this whole sort of thing of going, oh, yeah, but this is how it should be. And it's like, well, yeah, but it doesn't necessarily have to be like that.
Yeah, because it's a portrayal at the end of the day, isn't it?
It's a portrayal, exactly. So there's lots of different things going on with it. But for me, it really wasn't a thing. And I really like the way that relationship in the MCU has kind of unfolded almost, because it's not your sort of traditional, oh my God, like, you know, he had a different love interest in the first movie. MJ was always kind of there, and you always knew that it was going to be a thing, or potentially going to be a thing, but it wasn't, you know, with the first movies, you got those weird kind of dialogue sections, which I've always still found a little bit odd with the Spider-Man movies as well, where it's like, oh my, Mary Jane moved in when I was 6 years old, and I have been in love with her ever since. I have to do what's right. With great power comes great responsibility. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just these weird. All of that element is not there, but we've seen that already. It's like if they'd redone it and just redone the same thing, it's like, well, what's the point? Like, it had this kind of real sort of genuine feel to it. So for me, I quite liked it, to be honest. I thought it was all right. But then, if they'd done it and we hadn't already had the Tobey Maguire thing, or, you know, even the Amazing Spider-Man movies in between, I would probably be a bit like, what's this about? Do you know what I mean? This doesn't...
Yeah.
So it's context, I think, more than anything else. And also the way you perceive it. It's like, I don't really want to see the same thing again.
Well, yeah, of course.
Because, like I said, it's having those... The way that the three sets of movies come about is having... I'm able to view those all in a different way and love different things about all of them, some more than others, but I have an opinion about all three, and I can get behind different parts of all three. And it's, in some ways, I would take bits of all three of them and put them together to create like one, like the best movie, if you know what I mean. But the fact that there's bits of all of them is kind of the reason why I love it, and why I'm still sort of, you know, all these years later, still completely invested in the character and the franchise in overall, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. So before we were doing this, we were going to discuss Into the Spiderverse. Well, obviously, you didn't get around to seeing it, did you?
I haven't. It seems to be one of those things where, I know we've talked about it, I cannot find it anywhere. I don't know, I don't know where to get it. I don't know if I can get it on like a thing. Everybody I've spoken to about this thing has said it's ridiculous, but it was one of those. So me and Danny went to see it, and I'd seen the trailers, and I was like, let's go see it in the cinema. It looks cool. It's an animated movie. You can it's one of those films, like, it is another Spider-Man standalone film, but they've done it differently to the point where you can go watch it and almost dissociate it from Spider-Man as it is at the moment in everyone's mind as the live action films in the MCU and all of that. So we went in it with a fresh mind, and it blew me away, and I absolutely did not expect to see what we saw. The film is
it's an animated film, so naturally it's going to get less attention than live action movies. That's just a thing. That's how it is. A lot of people perceive animation as for kids, and unless it's Pixar, they don't really bother with it.
Yeah.
But this film it's animated like you're watching a comic book come to life.
Oh wow. Okay.
And it's not about Peter Parker necessarily. It's more about Miles Morales and that storyline. And there's a machine that explodes, and all different Spider-Men from different dimensions come out. You've got like the Spider-Man Noir, which is like the early 1900s Spider-Man, who's played by Nicolas Cage. You've got a Japanese kind of anime kind of Spider-Man, was a girl with a big robot, and you've got Peter Porker, which is like the Looney Tunes kind of pig Spider-Man. So the film does not take itself seriously at all. But you give this premise to people and it seems absolutely ridiculous. But it is so well done. It's so well written. And the film has so much heart that it made me cry. The end of the film made me cry. It is incredible. And obviously you haven't seen it, so I'm not going to keep talking about it too much because you're not going to be able to converse with me. But when you get the chance, mate, watch it. It is absolutely phenomenal, and it changes the way that you see Spider-Man. Like, you sit down and you watch a Spider-Man film, it completely subverts everything you know about Spider-Man and just gives you this fresh new story, almost like the new issues of comic books do. You know what I mean? When they bring out like a new version of a comic. And it's one of those things. And so you have all these Spider-Men in the film that come from all these different dimensions. A lot of people were on Twitter and on social media afterwards saying how cool it would have been if from these dimensions came the Tobey Maguire, the Andrew Garfield, and the Tom Holland Spider-Man into this animation voiced by the original actors. And the directors of Into the Spider-Verse actually turned around and said that they toyed around with the idea, but they felt that it was too soon. And it has been confirmed that a second Into the Spider-Verse is coming. So I'm wondering if Tom Holland, because obviously Spider-Man is still partly a Sony product, so they could have Tom Holland come in. They could also get Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. So how excited would you be to see an animated film based on Miles Morales, but it has this interdimensional Spider-Man theme happening, and you get to see, in an animated format, all three of the live-action Spider-Men interacting with one another?
I mean, it's kind of a dream situation in some ways, isn't it? Like, I think it's one of those things where it's like, in a weird way, it's almost like don't meet your heroes. I kind of feel like it's I don't know how it would go down, because it's like a fantasy situation to be able to put all three of them together. You know, we've talked about that already. It's like if we could take the best parts of each and put them all together.
Yeah.
What would it kind of worries me a little bit in some ways. It's like, what would actually happen if we did? Do you know what I mean? Like, if they're there, I know it's only obviously an animated universe or whatever else, but like, I think it would be really, really interesting to see how they did it for sure. But you know, with a little apprehension of, you know, don't ruin it. Do you know what I mean? It's like I'm sure they wouldn't, but do you know what I'm saying? It's like you don't want to get to a point where it sort of falls apart, and that the whole idea of it, because they are standalone situations, that for me is kind of the beauty of it. You can kind of look at each one of the three and appreciate them in different ways because of different things. If you then combine them, how would that then come about? Do you know what I mean? And how would that play out, I suppose, is what I'm saying.
I think, given the context, obviously, when you watch the film, you'll understand that it is absolutely ridiculous, and the way it is all portrayed is ridiculous, but it works with the themes that they're going for. I think if they had the three of them come in anyway, that would sell tickets because people would want to see it.
Oh,
so
for
it would
sure.
be an
of course,
instant success. But I think if they played off of one another and went for this kind of self-aware humor where maybe the Spider-Men are taking the piss out of each other and taking the piss out of their own franchises and stuff, it could be a really, really successful movie. I personally hope they do it, because I reckon it could be a lot of fun. And even if it sucks, they tried, and it's one of those things that everybody wants to see.
Yeah, man. I would definitely be interested to see it, and obviously with the context of having seen the first one, obviously it might be different. I would just be apprehensive about it. I think it's not don't do it. Definitely don't do that. Like, it would be really interesting to see. I'd certainly be intrigued by it. I just would be a little wary of, please don't kind of ruin something that
Yeah,
is so pure to me as an individual. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's fair enough, I guess. So yeah, when you get the opportunity, mate, go watch that film. I look forward to hearing
Yeah, I will
what you think, and maybe if you come on the podcast in the future, as I do plan to have recurring guests on the show,
Ooh,
we can have a
nice.
little discussion about it then.
Sounds good to me.
But for now, would you like to hear some behind the scenes and trivia that my expert intelligence has brought in for me?
Of course I would.
And by that I mean I sat on Google for an hour the other day.
Lay it on me, Dad.
So here's some stuff that I think is really interesting. That's the name of this segment.
So have you got a little intro for that, or is this it? Here's some stuff that's really interesting. Dun-dun-dun-dun.
No, this is it.
There you go. It's done.
So
Please continue.
an early outline of the script for Sam Raimi's films actually came from James Cameron, who envisioned a story pitting Spider-Man against Electro and Sandman, the villains who would eventually find their way into later Spider-Man movies. Cameron also came up with the idea of making Spider-Man's webs organic rather than synthetic creations shot from a device worn on his wrist. So the Amazing Spider-Man films and the well, actually, every other Spider-Man film that has come out is the wrist devices.
Yeah.
But obviously, the very controversial thing of the spider webs coming out of his wrist, which to this day grosses me out.
Yeah.
In the Sam Raimi films, was actually James Cameron's idea.
That is,
which I think is really
that
cool.
is pretty crazy. I had no idea that James Cameron had any form of involvement at any point with that. That's yeah. I mean, every day's a school day, kids.
As much as I find it disgusting, it's pretty cool little bit of trivia.
It makes a lot of sense in some ways, but like at the same time, it is proper weird.
It is weird, and that whole cafeteria scene as well. Kind of, it just grosses me out, man. I don't want that. The Green Goblin's armor. I really like this fact actually. The armor, obviously, it's green. Which meant it had to be filmed in front of a blue screen instead of a green screen during filming.
Yep.
During the effects shoots. The difficulty they had shooting all of those scenes is the Spider-Man costume is red and blue. So on a blue screen, you'd be missing half of Tobey Maguire.
Yeah.
So they had to shoot. And it would be interesting going back and watching the first film, knowing this actually, with all the shots of the Green Goblin and Spider-Man, which is effects shots, they were shot separately and stitched together in post.
That's mad.
That sounds
Dude,
like
yeah.
a ball ache to me.
It sounds like a massive ball ache. Obviously makes perfect sense given the way that the technology works, but yeah, I mean, I don't think you would know. I mean, you might have just ruined the films for me forever now. So, because when I watch it again and go, "Oh no, Bobby, what have you done?" Like, I'm gonna be, yeah, I'll be really mad. But yeah, no, I had no idea. I guess, like I say, it makes sense when you think about it, but you just wouldn't associate unless you know. You wouldn't associate that had been the case, but that's mad.
Yeah.
I don't think you'd notice. I certainly didn't notice in the films.
I mean, that's enough for me to be like, let's scrap Goblin as a bad guy. Let's have somebody who's not green. But kudos to them, man. Like that's a lot of work.
He's so good though, isn't he?
So here's a fun fact for you. And given what we have nowadays with the MCU, this is a really interesting fact. Hugh Jackman's Wolverine from the X-Men franchise was supposed to have a cameo in the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man film.
No way.
But Sony and X-Men studio 20th Century Fox tussled over the rights issues and the appearance didn't happen. Do you think that could have potentially led to a Marvel Cinematic Universe with all of these originals that we grew up with? So, you know, the original Fantastic Four and the X-Men and all these superhero films we got before. Do you think that was potentially on the cards back then?
It's hard to say, isn't it? Like, it's a difficult thing. Like, the thing is, it's like superhero movies in general have always been something that I've been into. Like, obviously sub path here, but like, you know, the Dark Knight as a thing, I love as a trilogy of movies. I think it's one of the best trilogies ever.
Yeah.
But equally, I loved all the original Batman movies. Again, and it's a similar thing. I look at those in a completely different way to each other, even though it's the same thing. And the same with X-Men, anything like that. Generally speaking, if you get a movie in that kind of realm, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm into this. Before, I might not like the film when I watch the movie, but it's the kind of film that I'm going to give the time of day. I think it would have been really, really interesting to see that happen, but I'm not sure it would have had the same gravitas given the way that the MCU then came about when they started with Iron Man and decided to build the whole thing.
It's a hard one, isn't it? Because you can't really speculate given that we have the MCU already.
Yeah, I just feel like, when you think about the main characters in the way that the comic books and stuff were written, I'm not a comic book expert by any means, but obviously I've done a bit of reading and a bit of research and stuff. And this whole idea of having kind of Captain America and sort of Iron Man as these two kind of protagonists, and they're both very different. One is very sort of obviously Americanized traditional values, eat your vegetables and stay in school, and then you've got Tony Stark who's like, fuck bitches, make money. And you put those two things next to each other, and it was inevitable that eventually, obviously, Civil War is a very famous kind of story amongst all of this. That was kind of the big thing. I remember my dad saying to me, like, Civil War will be the one. And I was like, oh, yeah. And then obviously they announced they were going to make Civil War. And I was like, oh, man, this is going to be sick. But it's like, it was so much bigger than that by that point, that Civil War was just a subplot in this.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It wasn't this whole... I had images of it being this sort of like massive thing where it was going to be, one side versus the other. And that is obviously what happened to an extent.
Yeah.
But it was obviously a whole sort of sub-story in terms of getting to that final big end game situation, which obviously is incredible. Like, it's amazing.
Yeah.
I don't think you would have had that by just kind of going, oh, well, we're a superhero movie and you're a superhero movie, so we could kind of like sort of put these things together. And do you know what I mean? It just feels a little bit kind of fabricated. When they went at it with the Iron Man thing, it's like, right, this is what we're going to do. It was a calculated decision to be like, let's build a whole franchise situation around this that lasted like 10-15 years. Like, it's insane that was a thing. And yeah, I mean, would I love to have seen it? Of course I'd love to have seen it. Like, it would have been amazing. Hugh Jackman as Wolverine is one of my favorite characters.
Well, could you imagine Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man and Hugh Jackman's Wolverine taking on a bad guy together? That is something I would give my arm to see that. Oh,
mate, like, it would be... There was just something about the way that both of those characters portrayed, and again, a lot of it's where I was in my time, and they were I fell in love with the whole Spider-Man character because of Tobey Maguire, not because of... Obviously, it was the character, but because of those films. It wasn't because of him necessarily, but it was those films. Hugh Jackman, I don't know if you've ever seen the deleted scene where he gets given the Wolverine costume.
That's in Is that in The Wolverine?
I can't remember which one it is, but when he opens up the case on the plane and there's the mask and everything.
It's the only one that I actually haven't seen.
Yeah, I can't remember. I'm fairly sure it didn't make it into the movie, but it might have done. I can't remember, but it was like an extended cut or something.
Yeah,
but,
I know what you mean. She gives him the suit on the plane, doesn't she?
He opens the case and he's very kind of just sort of, and he's very blasé about it, and basically it's just like, I'm not fucking wearing that. And I love that whole kind of that thing, because there was a lot of people being like, why did he never wear the suit? And it's like, yeah, but if Hugh Jackman wore the suit, he looked like a tool. Do you know what I mean? Like, the whole with him, it's the fact that he's a badass, and it's his portrayal of the way, obviously in the same way that Ryan Reynolds portrayed Deadpool like twice, once in one of the Wolverine movies, where he was this kind of fabricated thing, which was horrific.
Let's not go there.
But that's what I mean. But it's like, it's a portrayal, and even Ryan Reynolds being the way that he is, he's got the ability to be able to kind of take the piss out of himself, move past it, and that's that.
Yeah.
But like, I'd love to have seen it. Like, I loved the Fantastic Four movies when they came about. I thought the casting was great. The characters were great. Obviously, the fact that Chris Evans was in that became a bit odd because he then, it would have been nice to see the Fantastic Four appear in the MCU, but then obviously Chris Evans is Captain America at this point, so it's like, well, he can't do this as well. So, yeah, I mean, it would have been great, but I just feel like everything happens for a reason, doesn't it? And I think that that's kind of the sort of the charm of it. It's like it would have been nice, but at the same time, I think it works the way that it does. I mean, hopefully we'll see something of the X-Men franchise again.
Well, everybody thinks that's where it's going now, don't they? They think that they're going to introduce the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, and then you're going to have the next big bad guy, which I'm just going to throw out there now. I reckon will be Galactus.
Yeah,
I'm excited to see what will happen with that. Real quick, actually, who would you want to see be recast as Wolverine?
Oh man, see, it's so hard, isn't it? Because like Wolverine is Hugh Jackman. Like for me,
yeah, it's iconic.
Like I was at that age where I was just like, he is Hugh Jackman. So to recast a part like that is, I don't know, man. Like it's such a, because you've got to have that kind of aggressive sort of having that aggression, but also that emotion. You throw someone at me,
I'll give you mine, and it's a weird one, but I saw a Photoshop picture of it, and it works so well, and that's Taron Egerton.
I really don't even know how to feel about that, to be honest.
Honestly, I know it's strange, but if you go on Google and type in Taron Egerton Wolverine, and if you see the same picture that I saw it and I was like, that looks great. And he is such a diverse actor as well.
I'm going to try and do it while I'm talking to you. Mate, I rate him so highly. Like I think you might be right, I think he potentially could do it.
I prefer him than Zac Efron, which everybody else was talking about a few months back.
No way, man. Like, I mean, I've just seen a picture of it, and yeah, I mean, I think if they went down the route of the traditional kind of X-Men costume, all of that sort of stuff, and put someone like Taron Egerton in the suit, I think you'd get away with it.
Yeah.
And it could be really good. I think what you can't do, and this is not necessarily for him, but in general, is Hugh Jackman really made that part his own. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I can't remember. It was his big sort of breakthrough performance, wasn't it? Really, it's the Wolverine stuff, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, it kind of blew him out of the indie cinema.
That's what I mean. Yeah, he sort of became onto the world stage with that character. Basically, he made it completely his own. It wasn't the sort of typical like comic book version and everything else. I feel like as the MCU continues, it's more likely that the X-Men would follow a more traditional pattern anyway, to be honest. So if you were to follow that and put someone like Taron Egerton there, I'd be really interested to see what he did with it, because he is a great actor. Like there's no two ways about that. He's obviously done some massively diverse stuff already in his career and been great. But and he has the relationship of working with Hugh Jackman on that massive blockbuster hit Eddie the Eagle. So I don't know if you've seen that film, but I have.
I know it.
Do you know what? I actually quite enjoyed it, to be fair, but it's, in terms of those two combining, it's not exactly the way I envisioned that happening, but never mind. But yeah, like, I think someone like him could definitely do it. I don't really know off the top of my head, without thinking about it, I don't really know who I would kind of say would be the guy, if you know what I mean, because I think it has to be someone who's bold enough to sort of reinvent the character a little bit. Do you know what I mean? If you try and play it like Hugh Jackman, you either get Hugh Jackman or you don't bother, as far as I'm concerned. Like that's, you can't, with a character that iconic, you can't just try and emulate what somebody else has already done. You've got to do, it's kind of like the Joker. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. You've got to put your own, such an iconic character and performance that, you've got to put your own stamp on it. It may or may not pay off because we've seen different versions of that particular character happen and different people have different opinions on it. It would have been nice to have been able to understand what Jared Leto was saying. That's what I'm going to say. But what?
Yeah, it wasn't good, was it? It wasn't good.
It was. Oh, it's just the biggest car crash of a movie I've ever seen. But, we'll talk about that another day. But yeah, I think what you can take away, and the only thing I'll say about DC is I love a lot of the DC characters, but you've got a franchise like the MCU, which is literally taking over the world, and you are its direct competitor.
Yeah.
DC have done an absolutely remarkable job of writing the blueprint of how not to fucking compete. It's just shocking, man. And it's such a shame because some of the characters are amazing, but it is just like, what is going on?
Some of them are good. Some of the films are good. I really liked Aquaman and Man of Steel. Like they're good films, but
I am talking generally. Like for me, it's the standalone elements work really well.
Yeah.
And then as soon as they start trying to combine them together, and it just doesn't work for whatever reason. The chemistry of it doesn't work. The films visually don't look great. Yeah, I digress, but it's yeah. I think that's the main thing with it anyway, is that you have to take on the character and make it your own in such a way. Heath Ledger's portrayal of the Joker, someone like Jack Nicholson, unbelievable. Like, he did a ridiculous job of it. Heath Ledger was like, right, the only way I'm going to be able to do this is to completely spin it on its head. And that's what he did. And it's arguably one of the best cinema performances ever.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And that's what you'd have to do with it. So yeah, I mean, Taron Egerton could be a shout, man. It's one of those things where what I would say is I trust that the teams that Marvel as a general thing have got in place, I trust them to make the right decision. Do you know what I mean? They've kind of made some questionable decisions in the past. Obviously now Disney are involved. It could turn into Wolverine the Wildcat, Zac Efron situation, maybe. Who knows? But I just feel like, generally speaking, can you imagine like the X-Men just breaking down into like a breakbeat dance routine? No, it would be sick.
Jesus. Oh God.
Yeah, it was possible, but like I think generally speaking, the casting and everything else, like all of those things have been thought about and executed for a reason. And there's not many things where I look at it and go, oh, I wish they'd done this or I wish they'd done that. I think their execution, generally speaking, is really, really good.
Yeah.
And I trust that whatever they're going to do next, they would do something similar. So yeah, Taron Egerton maybe. Who knows?
Okay. We've got some quizzing to do, Mikey Page.
Oh, fucking hell.
I know you're dreading it, but before we get into it, let's throw it out there. Having had this conversation, who for you is the best live-action Spider-Man? Because I've changed my mind.
The best or my favourite?
If you were in a bar and you were really smashed and someone was talking about Spider-Man, and you go, no, mate, listen, the best Spider-Man is... Who are you saying?
Tobey Maguire. 100%.
Yeah, I'm at it too. I love it.
100%. He like I said before, it does come back in some ways. It comes back to that whole James Bond thing for me. It's like, in my mind, Tobey Maguire is Spider-Man. That's it. Do you know what I mean? There isn't any other... If we're talking about pissed up empage in a pub, that's what I'm saying, like 100%, because I love Tom Holland. I think he's great. I think he's probably it's the most believable in terms of an overall thing, but my favorite of the three is easily Tobey Maguire, just because it's the one that I fell in love with, you know? Like that's not going to change, unfortunately. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if one of the others is better, and probably arguably is, Tom Holland may be a better actor or Garfield may be a better actor. And there are bits of all three, like I said before, that I do love. I can watch all of them. There's not one film where I'm like, I don't like this. I know you were saying, the Amazing Spider-Mans didn't resonate.
Spider-Mans, you get me?
The rascal. But like, it's like those movies, they didn't resonate with me in the same way, but I was still able to kind of appreciate them and enjoy them and take something different from them. But yeah, like straight up, like Tobey Maguire, man.
Yeah.
Like, it's Tobey Maguire. It's the whole Kirsten Dunst thing. It's that relationship. It's James Franco.
Yeah.
Like, it's just so organic, and the thing that I was completely kind of taken aback by as a 10-year-old kid or whatever, being like, oh my god, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And when I watch the films, I watch the movies now as a fan, and I go to the cinema and or whatever, and I'm like, oh god, yeah, I loved that. That was so sick. But as those films, I was like, just wow. Do you know what I mean? It's like, oh my god, like this is incredible. It's like being able to, like, that whole kind of juvenile thing that you can't emulate that feeling. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree. Having had this conversation, I think the fact that we spent most of our time talking about the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man is one of those things that kind of confirms to me that in my brain cemented, if somebody said to me, who is Spider-Man? Who plays Spider-Man? I'd probably say Tobey Maguire. And whenever somebody talks about Spider-Man, I think about those films straight away. I think about how I had the little videotape of the original Spider-Man, and I put it in my VCR, and I used to, do my daily when I was a kid and just have that film on repeat.
Yeah.
Like,
agreed.
Yeah, I think thinking about it, as much as I love the Andrew Garfield portrayal, and I think Tom Holland's Spider-Man fits perfectly into the MCU, and for what they wanted, he is astounding.
Yeah, I agree.
I just think overall that Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man is Spider-Man,
It's Toby with an E for me.
Yeah, Toby with an E. Yeah. I'm glad.
Still don't understand that.
I'm glad we came to the consensus and we didn't end this arguing.
Yeah, agree.
We are, however, going to end this with you being upset because you don't want to do a quiz, but you have to do a quiz, unfortunately.
Oh, please don't make me do
You came on the show, fam. You wanted to be a part of this. You're doing a quiz, all right?
But it's hard enough to stomach Gnocchi tea on a normal day, and now I'm going to have to be worse than him publicly. We already know he's a better man than me. Why have you got to do this?
Because Schadenfreude. Right.
Oh,
so
God.
You understand that
fucking get it over with.
if you get 10 questions right, you have set the new bar and you would be number one. So you have to get every single question right.
If I believe it, it will happen.
If you do get 10 and nobody else in this season gets 10, I'll be sending you a bag of Spider-Man goodies. Don't get your hopes up.
Yeah, thanks. No pressure, Empatch, mate. Fuck,
I've already got all the Lord of the Rings stuff in my Amazon basket, don't worry. So
I hope it's like proper crap.
Oh yeah, it will
like send him a pencil and a notebook when you've used the pencil to write "fuck off" Nick in it or something. Yeah.
Right, so
come here on the first episode and ruin my quiz.
So, everybody listening,
love you, Nick.
There is still a competition on our socials that is live. Head over, follow the rules, and you can be in for a chance to win some goodies that Mikey Page is not going to be able to take part in by the end of this quiz. So, yeah.
I love how you've written me off already.
We'll see.
It's gone. Don't even, you've got to do the quiz, Mikey, but you're going to be shit.
You could pull it out of the water. I don't actually think I've been too harsh with these questions. I actually think I've gone a little bit easy. So we could see.
Oh, okay.
We could see a new frontrunner, and we could see.
Can you imagine the scenes?
There's going to be an Instagram war between you and Nick. Right.
If I get 10 out of 10, I'm going to ring Nick live on the podcast and
please
tell him,
please do.
Fuck him.
Please do.
Maybe we'll do that. We'll film that as a segment. Anyway, let's not worry about that.
Right.
Let's do it.
I have the easiest question in the world to start you off. Question 1.
Oh, don't say that. If I get it wrong.
If you get this wrong, I'm finishing the podcast right now. Question 1. What is Peter Parker's uncle's name?
Uncle Ben.
Of course it is. It's the Rice Man, Uncle Ben.
Yeah.
All right.
Off the mark. Get in.
Question 2. I'm glad you're getting comfortable. How many MCU movies has Spider-Man appeared in?
I'm trying to think. A rough count. I'm going to say 5.
5 is correct. 5 is the correct answer.
Yeah.
Nice.
Get in.
I can feel your bumhole twitching.
Oh, yeah, it really is. Like, it really is. It does that on a good day, to be fair. But 5, yeah. I think 5. Cool. Yeah.
Question
2 out of 2, Nick. I'm coming for you, bitch.
Question 3. Which newspaper does Peter Parker shoot photos of Spider-Man for?
The Daily Bugle.
The Daily Bugle is correct.
Yeah.
Question 4. Which of these is not an official Spider-Man comic series? A. Ultimate Spider-Man, B. Ultra Spider-Man, or C. Super Spider-Man?
I'm going to say Ultra Spider-Man.
Ultra Spider-Man is not a comic book series. Well done.
Yeah.
You're doing good.
Oh,
almost halfway.
I'm feeling good about this.
All right, question 5.
4. I thought I was going to get less than 4 in total, to be fair. So we're doing all right.
All right, question 5. What is Norman Osborn's supervillain alter ego?
The Green Goblin.
Here's the Green Goblin. Well done.
Yeah.
Question 6. In the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man film, what does Peter Parker want to be announced as when he is entering his boxing match against Bonesaw?
Bonesaw is ready. The Human Spider.
It is the Human Spider. Well done.
I love that. I love that scene, man. It's so good. It's like, Bonesaw is ready.
What are you doing up there?
Staying away from you. I like your dress.
You're doing good. 6 for 6. Right. Question 7.
Okay.
Name any 2 members of the Sinister Six. Now, for this one,
hell.
you get a couple of guesses more. I'm going to give you 4 guesses to get 2 of the members correct, if that makes sense. So you get 4 guesses to guess 2 of the 6.
Mysterio.
Correct.
Rhino.
No.
No. Okay. Trying to think. Would Dr. Octopus be in there?
Yes. Dr. Octopus is
Yeah.
actually considered one of the Sinister Six.
Yeah. Okay.
Rhino is commonly mistaken to be in the Sinister Six, but the original comic book Sinister Six was Doc Ock, Mysterio, Sandman, Vulture, Scorpion, and Kraven the Hunter, who, fun fact, is reportedly the villain for the next MCU Spider-Man movie.
Oh,
which could
cool.
be interesting.
Didn't know that. That would be cool.
You're killing it, dude. Absolutely killing it.
I mean, I'll take it. I did get one wrong there, but it was within the confines of the rules, so I'm going to take it.
It was. You are let off. All right. So, question 8. In Spider-Man 2, where does Peter Parker leave his Spider-Man suit after he loses his powers?
I literally watched it like 2 days ago. Where does he... After he loses his powers?
Yeah. So he goes through that crisis of starting to lose his powers, doesn't he? Because he starts having a dysfunction. And
Does he put it in a suitcase in the cupboard?
no.
Oh, man. Was that the third one?
I think it's the third one. He puts the symbiote suit in the cupboard, I think. In the second Spider-Man film, he puts it in a trash can in an alleyway. Fun fact, same alleyway that he kisses Mary Jane in the first Spider-Man film.
So I did think that. And then I said something else.
Also, fun fact number 2, the shot in the film is a recreation of the comic book front cover that features that scene.
I did not know that. Another lesson learned for me today.
Well, you are on par with Nick, and if you tie, I don't actually know what to do.
We're gonna have to fight. It's gonna have to be. There's gonna have to be a fight.
Yeah, we'll do it live on Facebook.
A genuine live streamed fight, which is a really bold thing for me to say because he has arms and.
I suppose I'll have to do a tiebreaker.
Yeah, I don't know. Or we could just fight.
Oh, you could. Yeah, fuck it.
Well, maybe. Did I mention we could fight? We could fight. That could work.
Nicky T, Mikey Page wants to fight you.
Oh, God.
All right, question 9. What famous words of wisdom does Uncle Ben give to Peter Parker before he becomes Spider-Man?
I was going to say something as a joke, but then I don't want you to take the point away from me. With great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah, correct. What were you going to say?
I was going to say what I said about Captain America. It's, eat your vegetables and stay in school. But I was like, I don't want that to be when I know the actual answer. I don't want to be the guy that loses to Nick because he's been a tool. If I lose, it has to be on my own merit. Now that I've got this far, I didn't think I was going to get any right. God.
All right. So this is your this question will land you on par with Nick, and unfortunately, because I don't know any other way to do the tiebreaker, you're just going to have to answer another question. Sorry, not sorry.
Wicked. Lucky me.
Okay, so question 10. Harry Osborn takes his father's mantle as a goblin, doesn't he? Yes. What is his supervillain name?
Now, on the credits, it says New Goblin. But whether or not that is actually what it is, I don't know. But New Goblin is my answer.
It's wrong.
Literally says it on the credits, so I don't know.
It's Hobgoblin.
Hobgoblin? I demand a recount. Fucking bullshit. What's Hobgoblin? I'm going to Google it. Literally says it. New Goblin, right here. I demand a recount.
Okay, actually, looking it up, it is there are multiple sources that say otherwise. So
It says it right here in the cast list. I don't want to come to your podcast and tell you that you're wrong, fam, but
all right, I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you because in the film it's not Hobgoblin.
well, Harry Osborn, James fucking Franco, my dude, shows up on some kind of Marty McFly shit flying around and he's called the New Goblin. So, what do you want me to do, Bobby? Come round here with your multiple answers for one question and then tell me that I'm wrong? You're going to tell me that I'm wrong? I love how I started off thinking I wasn't going to get any right and now I'm here being a little bitch about one question.
You're bringing the fucking beef.
Would you like some beef? Oh God, yeah. I mean, I didn't know that, but I will admit that when I saw, because these are the kinds of things that when I was watching the films, I was like, what are the questions that Bobby's going to ask me? And I did think this might be one. And when I looked up on the credits where it says New Goblin / Harry Osborn, played by James Franco, I was like, well, that's a fucking shit name for a character, isn't it? And then I was like, okay. And didn't bother looking it up any further than that. Not that Hobgoblin's any better, by the way.
Fair enough. I'm going off of comic book, but we are talking about the movies today, so I will give you.
Boom. Does that mean I'm as good as Nick?
That means you're on par with Nick, but it also does mean that I'm going to have to make up another question off the top of my head for your type.
Yeah!
I wasn't prepared for this.
Come on!
Right, hang on. Actually, do you know what? I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm just going to put you're both on par. Fuck it. If no one else gets above, you can both have a fucking present.
Yeah!
I don't give a shit anymore. I'm going to bed.
Yeah, I'm going to bed. I'm going to my room.
I'm going to bed. I need to pick up some extra shifts. I need to buy you a fucking Amazon gift bag now.
Oh, dude. I can't believe I didn't get the spider question. How stupid.
Bro. Seriously, I'm going to put you on par with Nick.
Woo!
I just don't know what else to do, and it's not fair to be like, you can't have 9 correct.
Save me a seat. What you should do is if other people get 9 throughout the series, you should then have like one massive podcast with all of us together and then we can all fight.
I would, but editing that would be horrible.
Yeah, fair point.
Oh, man. I'm sweating. I'm going to wrap this up. So... Mikey, thank you so much for coming on the Just Another Movie Guy podcast. It has been an absolute pleasure, and this has been exactly what I wanted it to be when we first pitched the idea with one another.
Dude, I'm really glad. Thank you so much for having me. It's been wicked. It's been real fun to talk about these movies. And yeah, just kind of reminisce a little bit about some of my favorite films of all time. So yeah, thank you so much for having me, and for making the quiz easy enough for me to understand, because I feel a lot better now. So thank you.
Thank you so much, dude. Thank you guys so much for checking out this week's episode of Just Another Movie Guy. I've had an absolute blast talking to Mikey today, and I'm hoping you guys have enjoyed it just as much. I don't think I've laughed having a conversation with someone since probably the lockdown started and we were still touring. So I've had a lot of fun recording this episode. Thank you guys so much for the support that you've been giving the show. It's honestly kept me going through these questionable and hard times. I hope everybody is staying safe, and I hope everybody is using this time wisely to better themselves at crafts and the things they're passionate about. If you're still working, thank you for everything that you've been doing, and keep it up. Obviously things are going to start going back to normal a little bit now. Stay busy, stay safe. Thank you so much for checking us out, and I will be back soon with a new episode. Next episode is going to be featuring Reese Hayton from Dissonance. If you haven't checked them out, they're a sick band from our town, Southampton, South Coast, UK. Highly recommend you go check out their music. It's all on Spotify and YouTube and Apple and everywhere you can find music and podcasts. And on the next episode, me and Reese are going to be talking about some really beloved films that I think a lot of people that listen to this podcast are going to get behind. So look out for that. I will see you guys soon. Thank you so much for checking out Just Another Movie Guy.